Namaskar, this is Late Edition. Tonight we'll focus on the IPCC Synthesis Report, which is the fourth and final installment of the fifth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Well, the panel has been chaired by Dr. R.K. Pachauri, an Indian, and the head of TERI since 2002. And it was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. So what does this report say? It says that climate change has impacts on natural and human systems on all continents and across the world. Irrespective of the cause of climate change, natural and human systems are sensitive to climate change. And some of these changes include decrease in cold temperature extremes, increase in warm temperature extremes, increase in extreme high sea levels, and also increase in heavy precipitation. It warns that continued emission of greenhouse gases will cause further long-lasting changes in all components of the climate system and leading to a likelihood of severe, pervasive and irreversible impacts for people and ecosystems. And it says limiting climate change requires substantial sustained reductions in greenhouse risks, and that the methods of adaptation and mitigation, they are complementary strategies, and no single option is sufficient by itself. It also says there needs to be substantial emission reductions over the next few decades and near zero emissions of CO2 and other long-lived greenhouse gases by the end of the century. Well, but these reductions pose technological, economic, social and institutional challenges. Also, adaptation options exist in all sectors, so they should be taken up. Mitigation can be cost-effective if it combines reducing energy use and greenhouse gas intensity, decarbonizing energy supply, reducing net emissions and enhancing carbon sinks. While many opportunities to link mitigation, adaptation and pursuit of other societal objectives through integrated responses exist. Well, Dr. R.K. Pachauri said that the window of opportunity is still available to reduce emissions, but we need to act fast.
Now, as it happens, the window of action is really closing very rapidly. So we have a very short window of opportunity. If you look at the total carbon budget to ensure that temperature increase by the end of this century will not exceed 2 degrees Celsius. We've already used up a substantial share of this. What's remaining for us is only 275 gigatons of carbon. So this clearly shows that we have a very limited window of opportunity, and I think the global community must look at these numbers and show the resolve by which we can bring about change.
Well, he also said that the impact would be largely felt on food security since farm yields would significantly decline.
If we do nothing, then by the end of the century, you can see the substantial decrease in yields that would take place. And with a growing population and higher incomes, you can imagine food scarcity and food security and the whole issue of starvation and hunger very large threats.
Well, to get a perspective on this report and adaptation and mitigation, joining us in the studio are Narendra Taneja, National Convener of the Energy Cell of the BJP. Joydeep Gupta is the South Asia Bureau Chief, Director of Third Pole. Thanks very much for being with us. We'll start with you, Mr. Taneja. Well, it seems to be pretty clear that fossil fuels need to be reduced substantially. They've given a target of 70% by 2050 and 100% by 2100. I mean, is this possible?
Well, first of all, it's a very important road, very significant, and I think it's very important that every single person on the planet must pay attention to the report and to the issues and concerns raised by the report. And but having said that, at the same time, it's important that in the Indian context in particular, challenges are actually very, very high, in the sense that we get roughly 90 to 91% of our total energy that we consume in the country is actually fossil fuel. It's coal, natural gas, oil, and so on. And renewable, we have been focusing a lot on renewable since the new government came into power. Renewable has been basically put right on the very top of the national energy imagination, and the government is also working very hard to put solar in particular at the forefront. But we all know that that's going to take time to basically help renewable energy occupy bigger space in India's energy mix is going to take some time, probably 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, maybe more. And it also depends whether we are able to get support and technology and capital, etc., from those countries which are first and foremost responsible for creating the situation that we are into in terms of climate change, global warming, and so on and so forth. So I think the short answer to your question is very big challenge for us, but at the same time we have to work in that direction. But I think this is something which basically will have to take a more holistic view. There has to be a global solution to the problem, and India has always been a participant in the debate. India has always been a very, very responsible a citizen of the whole debate, and I think we cannot really look for solution in terms of India and China alone. This is a global problem, and OECD countries, developed countries, actually have to play a bigger role in that, and I'm very sure that countries like India, we will be trying our level best to chip in and do whatever we can.
Mr. Joydeep Gupta, why is this 2 degrees so important for, by 2100? Because we've already seen, temperatures which are extremely high across the world, and people have adapted to it. So why does this, if 2 degrees, if the mean temperature increases, why is it such a danger?
2 degree is just a figure that was agreed upon by governments at a climate summit in the year 2010, at the end of 2010 at the Cancun Climate Summit in Mexico. It was done because the scientific consensus from, consensus, but the majority view at least, was that we can handle an average rise of 2 degrees. We cannot handle beyond that. Small island states were extremely upset with that figure. They were pressing very hard for 1.5 degrees. Maldives, Kiribati, Tuvalu, they all pressed very, very hard for 1.5 degrees. The other countries said we cannot handle it, let's keep it at 2.
Mr. Taneja, in terms of, you were talking about renewals now, renewables becoming the focus, but still, in terms of our growth needs, in terms of our energy needs, with regard, we were having a discussion about coal itself just the other day. Coal would be required at about 90% still to supply our energy needs. How much are we doing a cost effect analysis of all this to try and move towards renewables?
Well, of course, look at, for instance, look at the new announcement by the government and by the Prime Minister himself, and the kind of focus he had, given to solar energy in his home state when he was Chief Minister in Gujarat, for instance. We have to, as he said, we have to look at the total picture. We are talking about the global issue here. Look at the United States. The biggest story in terms of energy in the US today is shale gas and shale oil. What is shale gas and shale oil? It's the same fossil fuel. And the way it is produced, actually you contaminate water, you contaminate ground, you contaminate air. You practically contaminate everything that you touch. So that's the US, the biggest economy in the world. Canada, when we talk of Canada, the picture that emerges in our mind is nice, beautiful, green country. But look at, for instance, Canada's role in hydrocarbon. The new sources of, unconventional sources of oil and gas there. Greenland. Today companies are going to Greenland hunting for oil and gas there. They're hunting for oil and gas where? In the Arctic Circle. And all that is happening in the so-called developed world. You see, so what I'm trying to say is that, you see, developed countries, we have to join hands and help find a solution. For countries like India, we have 40 crore people with no access to electricity. The moment night falls, they are actually back to the Stone Age. We have 70 crore people living below energy poverty line in India alone. We have 1.7 billion people living below energy poverty line across the world, mainly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In such a situation, I think what is important is that developed countries, actually the responsibility falls more on them to come to actually, join hands with developing country like India, which has already given so much, importance and focus to renewable energy, so that we can reduce our dependence on fossil fuels rapidly. Right now, as I said, is in the region of 90 to 91%. In coming years, I think if we keep on, putting focus on renewable, it will come down to 80. It's only by 2050 that we will see a very significant change. But even for that, it is very important, you see, that we get some more support in terms of technology. And what is more important for us, we want clean air, green environment, but at the same time, we need to incentivize manufacturing, we need to create more jobs, we have to basically, expand India's economy. So huge challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Mr. Gupta, to what extent, I mean, will this report be utilized, or what kind of an impact is it going to have on the climate negotiations in Lima next month?
I think it will give a major impetus to that. The negotiations in Lima are actually a big milestone on the way to an expected global deal at the next climate summit in Paris in 2015. So I do expect this to give it a major impetus, because this is the main report that has come out after the 2007 report.
Right.
The 2007 report, which got IPCC the Nobel Peace Prize,
yes,
actually was the one that caught the public imagination and has pushed the climate movement, the climate negotiations to the point where it has reached so far. And this is the big one after that. I do expect, given the kind of scare story it has come up with, and with a lot of careful work by over 800 scientists. And remember that IPCC is actually a fairly conservative organization. So they are very careful now as to what they are using as scientific data to go into their report. If they after that come up with this kind of a scenario, I think it definitely will and should give a major
So it talks about carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, Mr. Gupta. So, I mean, Mr. Taneja was talking about shale gas and all these others, and looking at new discoveries also which are basically fossil fuel based. So the world is moving in a direction which is trying to, use the fossil fuel base, which this report is telling you to actually abandon. And it also says that, it says emphasis that they believe that they are confident that the world will abandon it. How is this possible? I mean, is it an unrealistic kind of report?
I don't think so. I think this is the only realistic report. I think the governments which are still pushing fossil fuels, and the industry is still pushing fossil fuels, are doing it out of an inertial momentum from the last century, and they are the ones who are living in an unreal world today. And because they are pushing the world to a situation which is simply not sustainable. We have a situation now where the World Bank itself, which has for so many years been saying that, paying money for fossil fuel generation, says that if you continue to use it, you are going to hit a 4-degree warmer world, which is simply, the world will exist, humanity won't.
We're taking a short commercial break. You're watching Late Edition. Stay with us.
दूध घर घर देते देते एक बात सीख गया हूँ, जैसे मेरे डेयरी का दूध लोगों की सेहत बनाता है, वैसे ही मेरी बैंक मेरी कमाई की सेहत बनाती है।
प्रधानमंत्री जन धन योजना के अंतर्गत करोड़ों लोग जिनके पास खाता नहीं था, उन्होंने खाता खोला है। आप भी अपना खाता खोलिए तुरंत।
ना बोलते थे,
ना देखते थे,
ना सुनते थे,
चुपचाप सहते थे।
महात्मा गांधी नरेगा के साथ शुरू हुआ ग्राम सभा द्वारा आयोजित सोशल ऑडिट यानी जनता का खुला मंच।
अब हम पूछते हैं अपने काम और मजदूरी से जुड़े सवाल,
देखते हैं सरकारी कागज, बिल, मस्टर रोल,
और सुनते हैं जवाब अपने सवालों के।
रोजगार गारंटी से जुड़ी हर शिकायत, हर सवाल पूछने का एक मंच, सोशल ऑडिट।
मैं घर घर काम करती हूँ, और पैसे कमाती हूँ। बाकी कामों के लिए मेरे पास फुर्सत ही कहाँ, लेकिन मेरे पैसे गांव भेजने का काम मेरी बैंक करती हूँ।
प्रधानमंत्री जन धन योजना के अंतर्गत करोड़ों लोग जिनके पास खाता नहीं था, उन्होंने खाता खोला है। आप भी अपना खाता खोलिए तुरंत।
तारीख बदलती है, आंकड़े बदलते हैं, तस्वीरें बदल जाती हैं, लेकिन सच नहीं बदलता। अपने परिवार को इस खौफनाक सच से बचाएं। सावधानी से गाड़ी चलाएं। गलत लेन में ड्राइविंग, तेज रफ्तार, सीट बेल्ट नहीं लगाना और ट्रैफिक सिग्नल की अनदेखी जैसी गलतियां जानलेवा हो सकती हैं।
Welcome back. You're watching Late Edition. We are discussing the IPCC synthesis report, largely dealing with fossil fuel emissions, etc. And we have with us Mr. Narendra Taneja, the national convener of the BJP Energy Cell, and Joydeep Gupta is the South Asia director of the Third Pole. Mr. Taneja, before the break, we seem to feel that this was a bit of an alarmist kind of thing, though Mr. Gupta is saying that this is the reality. What would you think? But from the point of view also, I need to ask you this, because it says that integrated policies would devalue the prices of fossil fuels, reduce the revenues from coal and other assets on trade and oil trade. And with these kind of lobbies, would that actually be feasible?
Well, I think, I would really like to look at this in black and white, in the sense, I wouldn't say that alarmist. I don't think report is alarmist. I mean, they've raised some very valid concerns and points. I mean, just look around what's happening in cities like Sao Paulo, New Delhi, Shanghai, or even in developed countries. So report is not alarmist. But at the same time, I think what we also need to do at the same time, we respect and we actually learn from such reports. But at the same time, we have to join forces and try to find a solution. For instance, for India, in the Indian context, I mean, what is the solution? I mean, can we really go for something else? I mean, coal is like the most important component of India's energy mix. And at the same time, oil. Is there kind of alternative to oil in the context of India? Probably nothing for next 30 years. Forget about it. Natural gas, probably nothing for next maybe about 50 years or maybe 60 years. Similarly, coal and all that. I think until 2050, our dependence on fossil fuel will remain very high. I'm not saying that is a very good thing or I'm very comfortable with it. But at the same time, the thing is, we have so many poor people in the country. We need to expand economy. We have, unfortunately, no other alternative. But having said that, it is very important that we actually also educate our people, engage our public opinion on like energy conservation, expanding public transport network, and also using, better quality fuels, especially when it comes to diesel and so on. So there are so many other, for instance, because conservation is known as the sixth source of energy. So I think we should be investing more on that. But as I said, at the same time, alarmist, I wouldn't say that, but at the same time, we will have to find a middle path. And the middle path is that we expand our economy, we use few fossil fuels, but more responsibly, and at the same time, we invest more in renewable energy.
Mr. Gupta, what are the measures that India is taking, would you say?
India is taking some significant measures, needs to take a lot more, there's no doubt about it. Let's talk about the energy mix, what Mr. Taneja was saying. I agree that as things stand now, there is a huge dependence on coal and other fossil fuels. But I'm a bit more optimistic as to what the future is probably going to bring us. You see, what's been happening on the energy front for the last 60 odd years is that we have been persistently having this 10% gap between the demand and the supply, which is why 40 crore people do not have electricity today.
Sure.
And to build a coal-fired power plant takes you 8 years, to build a hydroelectric plant takes you about 10 to 12 years. So you'll continue to have this gap, however many you build, whereas a solar plant is built in 2 years. That's the way to go. These 40 crore people, the only way to go is to leapfrog into solar for them.
So what are the measures that we are taking?
Just quickly, one point. Just to actually add to what you were saying. For instance, in BJP, we are focusing a lot on the solar energy. What actually we plan to do it over the next 5 years to bring about a solar power revolution in the country, and not depending so much on solar power plant only, but basically, taking solar power with the minimum possible investment to the household. In some cases, for instance, investment to take electricity to one household would not be more than 7,000 rupees, capital cost, and the maintenance cost would be actually much less. And so I think there are so many other innovative ideas. So like in BJP and the present government, we are investing a lot of energy and time and space on finding a solution. But having said that, when it comes to the debate, the global debate on emissions, I think it's very important to keep in mind. In India, you go to any mandi, you go to any small or medium-sized factory, you go to any Indian household, you will find how do we basically, generate and consume energy. 50% of energy generated and consumed in India is still done by humans, which is zero emission. So can you name one country in the world where, for instance, your dependence on the dependence on zero emission energy is as high as in India? So I think as far as India is concerned, India is a very responsible country, but at the same time it is very important that we take energy to the maximum number of people. We eradicate energy poverty in the country. We also eradicate energy apartheid in the country with people like me and you enjoying 6 air conditioners of 40 crore people without this thing. But at the same time, it is very important that concerns raised in the report are very important. They must be addressed, they must be attended to, and they must be nationally debated.
Okay, we need to take another short commercial break, but when we come back, we'll discuss about adaptation and mitigation. Do stay with us.
जैसे मेरे सिलाए हुए कपड़े एक एक धागों को जोड़कर बनते हैं, वैसे ही मेरे खाते में बचत पैसे जोड़ कर बनती है। बढ़ते जा तू बढ़ते जा, बैंक की ओर तू कदम बढ़ा।
प्रधानमंत्री जन धन योजना के अंतर्गत करोड़ों लोग जिनके पास खाता नहीं था, उन्होंने खाता खोला है। आप भी अपना खाता खोलिए तुरंत। बढ़ते जा।
आप सबने दुनिया भर में क्या मिसाल बनाई है, जिस सफाई से आपने कचरा वहीं फेंक दिया। और मन्नू आंटी क्या कूड़ा फेंकती हैं, ओलंपिक्स के गोला फेंकने वाले भी शर्मा जाएं। और ये देखिए, लक्ष्मी भाभी की सफाई तो गांव-गांव में प्रसिद्ध है। हमारे सुखिया भैया मन की करते, जहां सोचा वहीं शौच कर दिया। ये देश जो आप ही का घर है, उसे क्यों गंदा करते हैं? थोड़ी शर्म कर लो, सोच स्वच्छ कर लो।
अगर एक बार 125 करोड़ देशवासी तय कर लें कि मैं गंदगी नहीं करूंगा, तो दुनिया की कोई ताकत नहीं है जो हिंदुस्तान को गंदा कर सकती है।
स्वच्छ भारत, एक कदम स्वच्छता की ओर।
पहले यहाँ कोई काम नहीं मिलता था। महात्मा गांधी नरेगा ने यहाँ काम शुरू करवाया। महात्मा गांधी नरेगा ने हमारे परिवार को हर साल 100 दिन रोजगार की गारंटी दी है। महात्मा गांधी नरेगा में काम करने के बाद 15 दिन में मजूरी मिल जाती है। अब मजूरी के लिए शहर नहीं जाना पड़ता, गांव में ही काम करते हैं, बच्चों के साथ रहते हैं घर में।
महात्मा गांधी नरेगा साल 2012-13 में करीब 5 करोड़ परिवारों को रोजगार दिया गया।
समय पे काम, हाथों हाथ दाम।
Welcome back. Mr. Joydeep Gupta, I mean, there are numerous sort of jargon that they use in this thing, like CDR, carbon dioxide removal, CCS, carbon dioxide capture and storage, SRM, solar radiation management, stuff like that. So to what extent have we, adapted to these sort of things?
Well, yes, these reports are always so full of jargon that actually the internet is just full of these jargon busters also nowadays. So yes, they live in their own world. In layman's terms, let me quickly tell you what this report says about India. What it says is the main risks that it poses for India, climate change poses, is that wheat and rice production in North India are at serious risk.
Okay.
And this is serious, I mean, because that's the basis of our agricultural economy. It says Delhi is at serious flood risk. It says Kolkata and Mumbai are both at serious coastal flooding risk. It says annual runoff in flood runoff of water in flood-prone areas will increase by about 40%.
Okay.
That's huge. The warmest maximum days, the daily maximum will go up, and so will be the minimum. The number of days where it's above 20s will significantly go up.
Sure.
So it's in our own interest, not because we need to feel bad, feel guilty, not because it's in our own interest to combat climate change to the maximum.
We seem to be running short of time, but Mr. Taneja, if we have to look at, if climate change is already there in a reality, could we invest in science that, can try and make use of this trapped heat and try and create energy that can be, sort of like solar energy is from the sun, but there is also climate heat energy, which is climate change energy.
Well, there is heat energy. People are talking of gravity energy, basically using gravity as energy. People are talking about even tapping into northern lights and southern lights. People are talking about so many other sources of energy. Gas hydrate, again, in a way fossil fuel, but gas hydrate is one thing. So there's so many. I'm personally very optimist. I think the kind of picture that is painted there by end of the century probably will never really go that far. In the sense when it comes to food security. When we look at food security in the conventional sense, these threats are there. But talk to scientists. There's so much research going on, for instance. I mean, oceans, we can use oceans to feed population of 20 billion people if required, on this planet.
But is there enough investment focus on this?
I think there is a lot of work going on which is not on the front page of newspapers or not in television headline. There's a lot of work going on energy. There's a lot of work going on food security and so on and so forth. So I'm very optimistic about the whole thing. I respect and admire and actually salute the report. But at the same time, there is absolutely no need to panic. There is absolutely nothing to worry about. What is important is pay respect to this thing, listen to the report and do whatever you can, but at the same time, remain optimistic. I think the future in front of us is very, very bright.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us here on Late Edition. Well, the final report of the Intergovernmental Panel emphasizing its importance is, it's almost saying that like a final warning. It's like a final warning. And next month, the world leaders will be gathering in Lima for the next round of climate negotiations, hoping to come to a consensus for a North-South deal in 2015 in Paris. Well, India's stand has been common but differentiated responsibility, equity and technology transfer. Well, the report says that the average surface temperature has already increased by 0.85 degrees Celsius since 1880. The target is to keep it below 2 degrees by 2100, or else the world would become uninhabitable. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.